Hello, everyone. Happy 2021. My name is Molly Anderson. I'm the Executive Director of UB's Center for Leadership and Organizational Effectiveness. I'd like to officially welcome you to our new series, 52 Weeks of Leadership, giving you what you need to lead in 2021. And this program was designed because we want to help boost your creativity and innovation in the new year. We want to help learn together some modern leadership strategies. We want to discuss different concepts with our faculties and our global experts. And most importantly, connect with peers like you, because frankly, we have work to do in the area of leadership in our world. And we think by starting the year off and committing to a weekly check-in with each of you, that many good things can come of us learning together and working together. So today is the first day of our series. We're going to be meeting every Monday, with the exception of Mondays that fall on a holiday like Martin Luther King Day, where we'll schedule it the following day at noon. So make a note of that for the session coming up on January 18th, that we'll have that program take place on the 19th instead. So I'd like to welcome all of you for being here. I'm so thrilled that I can see some of our friends coming as far away as Latvia and Ghana. I see many of my friends from Leadership Niagara and Leadership Buffalo joining us. And of course, a lot of our colleagues from the School of Management, alumni and friends. So thank you all for being here. We have a great first session planned. And today we have Dr. Jim Lemoine, who's an assistant professor in Organization and Human Resource Department in our School of Management. For those that don't know Jim, he is his PhD from Georgia Institute of Technology. His research areas include leadership and motivation, ethics and morality, and creativity. He serves on the board of the Greenleaf Center for Servant Leadership, as well as a facilitator in many of our CLOE programs in companies big and small, locally and nationally. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Jim Lemoine, who's going to be talking with you about leadership. Jim?
Okay, let's see if we got the green. Hey, look, it's me. All right, we've got the green screen to work. Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us here on the first week of 52, a long journey that we'll all be on together. Although I'm happy to say, and you may be grateful, that I will be in the audience for most of those 52 weeks rather than the speaker, but I'm honored to kick it off. First off, for those of you who recently celebrated the new year, I want to wish you all a very happy one. Welcome back. Sorry that you're back at work doing workish things. I know I kind of struggled with that this morning as well. I'd like to open with the traditional Lemoine New Year's greetings, which basically go like this. I sincerely hope that your troubles this year only last as long as my resolutions usually do. It's 2021, and here at the Center for Leadership and Organizational Effectiveness, we wanted to start out with something new, something different, something big, something hopefully useful. Because God knows, if there was ever a time where we needed leadership, strong leadership, maybe a new approach to leadership, maybe a better approach to leadership, maybe a better understanding of leadership, after the year we all just finished, now is probably the time. Just to give you a little of an idea of why we're doing this and what we're hoping to accomplish with it. There's two big things and just personally, there's two big things that I wish more people knew around leadership, and specifically here, leadership at the University at Buffalo in the center. The first one is, most people know that there's lots of scientific research in the area of medicine, in the area of healthcare, in the area of computing and technology and engineering and the environment and things like that. When I think of scientific research, I always think of a really impressive looking man or woman in a lab coat, and they've got the test tubes and the Bunsen burners doing things like that. But what I don't think about necessarily is leadership, organizational leadership, business leadership. One thing that I had no clue about until actually shortly before I began my PhD program was there is a huge and vibrant scientific research community studying organizations and how people act within them, why people do the things they do within them, how we can motivate people, how we can make people more satisfied, committed, engaged, more part of the team, productive, so on and so forth. There's a huge research in all of these areas, which is what I got my PhD in, organizational behavior and psychology. And probably the biggest subset of that is on this thing we call leadership. But most people don't, it's not just that people don't know what the research says about leadership, it's people don't even know that it exists. So one of the reasons that we wanted to put together these 52 weeks of leadership is to try to share some exposure. Here's what the research says. Here's what scientists have done, peer-reviewed research, published in papers, replicated, and not, big theoretical models with boxes and arrows that are really hard to explain, or abstract terms. You remember your business textbooks, not things like that, but But here's what the research says about how to put leadership into practice. Here's what the research says about here's how you motivate people at work. Here are things that work for engagement. Now, there aren't a lot of one-size-fits-all solutions because obviously we're in different contexts, different industries, different levels, and all of that plays a role, but there are some rules that you can keep in mind. And so for every one of these 52 weeks, we're going to try to leave you with something, something to think about, something to try out, something new that you can do, something that can enhance your leadership with your teams, with your peers, even sometimes maybe even leading your boss. That's the most fun one. That's the first thing, is that leadership research exists and then most people don't know about it. The second thing is that a lot of, and I say this with some pride here, if you look down here at the UB there, all this leadership research that exists, a lot of people even here in West New York don't know that UB, the University at Buffalo, is right at the forefront of it. That some of the most impactful studies, some of the biggest paradigms, some of the ground-changing stuff has come right out of the University at Buffalo, right here. Some of the biggest names in the leadership field have either been here or are here now. And lucky you, we've lined them up to be your speakers throughout the next 51 weeks. For instance, in 1975, there's this really groundbreaking study, and you're going to laugh when I say this, and you have every right to laugh. But in 1975, there was this whole new idea in the science of leadership that came out of the University at Buffalo, which was this: maybe leaders treat everybody differently. Maybe they don't treat everyone exactly the same. And that opened up a whole bunch of research on in-groups and out-groups. And should you treat people differently, or should you try to treat them all the same? And if you should treat them differently, how should you do it? Then in the 1980s, we had a UB professor who came up with this idea that, and we'll talk about this a little bit today, that sometimes what we call leadership isn't actually leadership. We just assume it is if people are charismatic, or they're popular, or they're successful, or they're good looking, or they're rich, things like that. Fast forward 15 years, and there's a lot of research going into how leadership really depends a whole lot on relationships and networks, not just with the people you lead, but throughout your organization and even outside your organization. And the guy who came up with all that research, Prasad Malkundi, is a professor who will be talking to you as part of these 51. I could go on and on. But basically, the second thing that we really wanted to get out there is, hey, we got some awesome faculty. We've got some amazing faculty that we're proud of that have done some really groundbreaking, thoughtful research that has implications for how can we do this in practice. And beyond that, we've got a network of practitioners here in West New York, UB alumni all over the world that have done amazing things and have great stories to tell. So our goal in this series, as much as we can, is to meld research and practice on leadership, to put the two together. Here's what research says. Here's some practitioner experience. Let's put those in a big pot and stir them up, and let's see what can we take away from each week of these 52 weeks, well, 51 out of this one, to say, here's something new that I'm going to try this week. Here's something new that I'm going to do. So over the course of the next 51 weeks, you're going to be hearing about coaching and mentoring. You're going to be hearing about power. You're going to be hearing about politics. You're going to be hearing about creativity and engagement, both what it is and how to grow it, about relationships building, not being closed-minded, tunnel vision about where those relationships should go, managing conflicts, teamwork, diversity, morality, and ethics. The list just goes on and on and on. We've got a pretty stellar lineup, we think, planned for you. Again, merging the best of some of the UB research resources we have, along with, frankly, a lot of CEOs and top executives, great leaders of some of the most successful companies in the area, in the region, in the country, maybe even in the world. So that's kind of our goal with all this. And it all gets back to leadership. How can we do it? How can we be better at it? And I would like to open with just a deceptively simple question. Do we really know what this leadership thing is? And I put this to you. What is leadership? It's a deceptively complicated question. In fact, I taught a class here called Ethics, Leadership, and Other Deceptively Complicated Things. Could you define that word? Leadership is one of those weird words that we use all the time. I use it every day. I probably use it once an hour because I teach this and I research it. But what does it mean? If you look it up in the dictionary, you're not going to get a lot of help. When I looked up leadership in an old dictionary that I got in high school, it said what a leader does. So then I looked up leader and it said someone who leads. And then I looked up lead and it said someone who practices leadership. And then it just went, round and round and round. It never actually said what it was. Leadership is like the. You know that word, the, T-H-E? We use it every day. What does it mean? Could you explain that to me? Could you describe that to me? Could you define it to someone who maybe is not familiar with the English language? Because I couldn't, right? So what is this leadership thing? If we're going to talk about it for the next 52 weeks, I think it's important that maybe we're on the same page. And here's something I want you to think about. Maybe what it means to you is not necessarily what it means to your coworkers, to your boss, to the people who report to you, to other people on this call. Maybe we've all got different definitions of it. Now, I've heard things like leadership is a job title. I've heard a lot of people say, well, when you manage employees, you're a leader. And I actually kind of disagree with that. I think maybe you're a supervisor, maybe you're a manager, but does that necessarily make you a leader? For me, I think you might disagree, but for me, I think that's kind of a higher bar, right? Leadership, does it just mean, I ask people this all the time, what it is, does it just mean getting people to do what you want them to do? Well, maybe that's part of it, but I always say, when people say, yeah, leadership is power, leadership is getting people to do what I want them to do, I say, okay, I've got a gun, I'm going to hold it to your head, I'm going to ask you for your wallet. You give it to me. You are doing what I want you to do. Does that make me a leader? Well, no. Well, then leadership must be something beyond that, right? What else could it be? I've heard people say, well, if you're the most popular one, you're the leader. If you're the most charismatic one. Lately, we've heard a lot, if you win an election, you're a leader. I don't necessarily buy that. I think lots of people have won elections and have been popular that really did not have any of the qualities that I think of when for a leader. Creating decrees, making lots of money. If you're rich, if you're successful, you must be a leader. No, I don't think so at all. And I know I'm going to hurt some people's feelings here when I say this, but the exemplar for this for me is Steve Jobs. Dude was a very impressive business manager, made a ton of money, brilliant innovator, absolutely. But if you actually read his biography, read interviews with people who worked with him, as far as actual leadership, inspiring people beyond just the creativity of his inventions, he really wasn't very good at leading people. I've even heard that leadership is manipulation, and that's an interesting take on it. I don't think it's necessarily any of these things. Maybe it could be part of some of it, but it goes beyond that. I think it is important, though, that we're all on the same page, especially as we're going to go on this journey together, 52 weeks of leadership, right? We want to learn to be better leaders. Well, what are we really talking about? What does this word mean? What is leadership? That's one of my favorite memes around leadership. It's hard to get at. And when I think about leadership, and I know this is going to be a weird way to open up the 52 weeks of leadership by comparing leadership to obscenity, but that's what I'm going to do here. There's a great story actually about the legal definition of pornography. It was back in 1964, and Justice Potter Stewart on the United States Supreme Court had to legally define pornography and obscenity for the Supreme Court record. And he actually held up the record for weeks because he couldn't figure out how to do it. How do you put into word what exactly does obscenity mean? How do you legally define it? And finally, he just ended up writing in the legal register, I don't know how to put it into words, but I know it when I see it. There's leadership, right? That's what I would answer. I'm not sure exactly how to put it into words, but I know it when I see it. Now, when I ask people, who are the leaders? Maybe you can't tell me what leadership is, but who are leaders? There's three names that come up a lot. People seem to agree that this guy, Abraham Lincoln, the 16th president of the United States of America, this guy was probably a leader. Whatever it is, he's got it. A lot of people seem to agree that this guy, Nelson Mandela of South Africa, that he was a leader. Don't know what it is, but whatever it is, he's got it. And then Mother Teresa, who hopefully shouldn't need an introduction either. Whatever leadership is, we don't know what it is, she's got it. So what do these three people have in common? Think about it. If I search for leadership, great leadership on Google, these are three names that pop up pretty much the most as well, along with a couple of others like Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., who we'll talk about in a couple of weeks. What do all of these people have in common? You think back to some things we said before. Well, none of them ran successful companies. I don't think any of them were hired to be a manager. They weren't all necessarily rich. They didn't necessarily look alike. They didn't really have too much in common. But what did they do? What did they have that makes us as human beings look up to them and go, be inspired by them, be motivated by them, by saying, wow, you're a great leader. I want to follow you. I mean, I think that's part of it, right? It's a little tautological, but leadership means that people want to follow you. How do we get there? What do they have in common? Well, I talked about what they don't have in common. So what do they have in common? Well, they had missions. They had goals, right? They were very goal focused. There were things they wanted to accomplish. They saw things that were one way, And they thought it needs to be a different way, and they took action to make it that way. They were willing to personally suffer. They were willing to sacrifice to make things that different way. And keep in mind, it doesn't have to be something massive and groundbreaking like it was for someone like Lincoln or Mandela. It could be something as simple as, here's a process at work that's broken. Here's a way we treat people. Here's a way we treat customers right now that's not who we are. That's not who we want to be. Here's part of our culture that is not productive anymore. Maybe 30 years ago when the organization formed, maybe that was a really productive part of our culture, but now it's not anymore. So it doesn't have to be necessarily something groundbreaking, but here's the way things are, and here's the way things should be, and doggone it, I'm going to take a stand. That's something you could say about them. You could say that they cared about their mission. You could say that they cared about their followers. And you could say that they wanted to make a positive difference, whether it would be a big one, which was really what Abraham Lincoln was after, or just a series of small ones, which was more what Mother Teresa was out for. But they all wanted to make a difference. None of them were happy with the status quo. None of them were good enough. They were all told, I've read all their biographies, they were all told, you're moving too fast. This is too much change right now. This isn't the time for it. In 100 years, maybe it'll be a time. And they said, no, why? If this is the right thing to do, if this is the thing we should do, if this is the better way to do it, why can't we do it now? So these are some ways to look at leadership, but it's still, I don't know, it's still vague, right? It's still like, I know it when I see it, but it's hard to put it into words. And again, I think it's really important. This is a game to play. When I used to be in the corporate world, before I was a professor, one of the companies I worked for was the Schwann's Food Company, big yellow trucks, best ice cream on the planet. And one of the hobbies I had, because I'm a nerd, was asking my coworkers, my peers, my managers, what is leadership to you? And I got totally different answers. So if we wanted to talk about how do we be a better leader, well, we were all going in different directions. So that's a challenge I give to you. Go back to your team, your organization, your boss. Ask them, what does leadership mean to you? When you say we need to be a better leader, are they just going to say you need to be more successful? Are they going to say that you need more people towing the line? Are they going to say you're inspiring more people? Are they going to say you're developing more people? It's an interesting activity. But until you're on the same page, you can't move together in the same direction. So this is something I've given a lot of thought to, this question of what is leadership. And I've read a lot of definitions of leadership, and I'm going to be honest with you. I think most of them are bull. Well, I probably can't say that, but I think most of them are bull. I've looked around for some really good ones, and I'll tell you one of the best ones I found, not the best one, not the perfect one, but one of the best ones comes from this guy. And this is a picture that I show in my MBA class, my undergrad class, and I always open with the challenge, can you tell me who this is? And I will never forget the class. It was an undergraduate class, actually. It was not here at UB. It was at Georgia Tech, where I used to teach, where someone, one of my smarter students actually raised his hand and said, that's George Washington. And I said, no, it's not. And one of the other students decided to help him out and said, no, silly. That's not George Washington. How can you even say that? Obviously, that's Abraham Lincoln. So we talked a little bit about history and civics knowledge at Georgia Tech. But for those who are not quite clear, sometimes there's some mix-up. Is that Patton? This is Eisenhower. This is General Dwight Eisenhower, the United States general who basically led the Atlantic campaign in World War II. He's credited with winning it for his brilliant strategies. One thing a lot of people don't know is that he credits a lot of those brilliant strategies to his troops. There was something very unique that he did that we can all learn a lot from. And that was in the US Army at the time, they had two tents when it was mealtime. They had the officer's tent with the nice cushy chairs and the good food. And they had the enlisted men's tent, which was where everybody else ate. And maybe they had benches if you're lucky, and you got to choose between gruel, slop, and mystery meat. And as it turns out, almost every chance he got, General Eisenhower would actually eat in the enlisted men's tent. And he would always find some soldier who he'd never met before and sit down right next to him, and he'd open the conversation. Here's a great way to start a conversation. Hey, soldier, how's the war going for you? And after that, get to know him, ask him a little bit about home and how you're doing. And then after he kind of broken down the defenses and got him talking to the supreme commander of the Allied forces, he'd say, hey, soldier, what am I doing wrong? What do you see that I don't? I know that when you're down in the trenches, you see things that I can't from my command tent. And you say to your buddies, boy, if those high and mighty so-and-sos could only get their heads out of their you-know-whats, they would do this and not this, and they're not thinking straight. They need to do this. They'll never win the war like that. And he'd say, well, soldier, I am that high and mighty so-and-so. I'm here now. Tell me what I'm doing wrong. Tell me what I'm missing. And at first they'd say, oh, you're not doing anything wrong, General Eisenhower. It's fantastic. And he'd push him. He'd say, no, I'm doing something wrong, obviously. And you've got a perspective I don't. Tell me. And eventually he'd get some ideas from him. He'd get some viewpoints, some perspectives. He was humble. He was listening. He knew that even though he's the supreme commander, he didn't have all the answers. And he would take those ideas back to the officers' tent. And true, sometimes there were things that weren't feasible, these ideas. Sometimes there were things they'd already thought about or they'd already tried and the soldiers didn't know about it. But sometimes they were really good ideas. They were really valuable perspectives. And again, he used that as his basis. He said, this is why we were able to win World War II. Then he became President of the United States of America. Did you know that? He was the 34th President of the United States of America. You probably knew that. What you might not have known was historians generally recognize him as the last truly bipartisan president of the United States, which is, that's a big compliment, but it's also a little bit depressing when you think about how far back that was. What historians mean by that is that he was a Republican who served with a Democratic Congress. And please don't make judgments based on political parties. Obviously, the political parties 70 years ago were very different than the ones they are now. So whatever preconceived notions you have, just get that right out of your head. He wasn't a perfect president by any means, and he certainly made some decisions I didn't agree with. But one thing that historians really noted about him was he didn't let the power go to his head. He was always listening not only to the people ranked below him, but even to the people who disagreed with him, to the point that he was able to get a lot of stuff done despite that Democratic Congress. Can you imagine that in the last few years with all of our split governments? In fact, there's a reason it's called the Eisenhower Interstate Highway System. Do you know the plans for the interstate highway system had been drawn up for 15, 20 years before he ever took power, but the president and Congress could never get their acts together to get the funding and to actually make it happen? And he sat down with the Democrats and said, hey, let's make this happen. In fact, in my office, I can't show it to you now because I'm in this fancy University of Buffalo green screen studio, but in my office, I actually have one of his letters from the White House in which he wrote to one of his cabinet members saying, hey, these 3 Democratic Congresspeople, they've got a fantastic idea for an agricultural committee. We are going to go with that idea. We're not going to take the credit from them. They're going to be part of it. We're going to work together and make this happen. We're going to work together and make this happen. That's, I don't know if I can put it into words, but I know leadership when I see it. That sounds a lot like leadership to me. Here's Ike's definition in his own words from his biography. He said this: leadership is getting people to do what you want them to do because they want to do it. Look at that for a second. Because they want to do it, not because they have to. Not because they're forced to, not because they're afraid of you, not because you could fire them, not because you could demote them, not because you could give them a pay cut, not because you could give them a bad shift, not because they want to impress you, not because they want a promotion, not because they want a raise, not because they want to look good, not because they want to suck up, not because they want to beat somebody else, but because they genuinely want to, because they look at what needs to be done, what you as a leader say needs to be done, and they say, I believe in that. That's something that's important to me. I understand why that needs to be done, and I agree. And that's why I'm going to do it. That's not the kind of leadership that I've had for most of my career. How about you? And is that the kind of leadership that your employees, that your teams, that your subordinates, your associates, whatever you call them, is that what they experience from you? Maybe sometimes. How can we make it all the time? In most organizations I've worked with, I've been managed. I've been supervised. I knew I had a job to do. I did it. I got a paycheck. A couple of places I've worked, I did it because I really believed in it, because I thought, yeah, I want to do this. I want to do this. I don't need the boss telling me to do this because I see the reason for it myself. That to me is at least half of the leadership puzzle right there. Leadership is getting people to do what you want them to do, not because they have to, but because they genuinely want to do it. The scientific term for this is they're intrinsically motivated. Extrinsically motivated, well, I'm afraid of punishment. Well, I'll do it for a reward. Intrinsic motivation rather, I don't need punishment, I don't need a reward. I see why this is important, I want to do it. That's the role of the leader. And I've been sharing this definition with people for years, as long as I've been at UB. And I've been thinking lately, though, that I'm not sure it covers the entire scope of leadership, because in my mind, there's always been 2 halves to leadership. Part of it is indeed motivating and inspiring, but another half of it, at least to me, this is my opinion, is you've got to position people for success. You've got to make sure they've got the skills to do the things that you want them to do because they want to do it. So can I add something? Never done this before, but I thought it would be good for the 52 weeks. Can I add something here? Yeah, leadership is getting people to do what you want them to do because they want to do it. but it's also this. You're helping them to accomplish things that they never knew they were capable of. You're helping them to do things that it never would have occurred to them, I could do that. You are pushing them past their limits. Let me be clear here, because I'm not generally a huge fan of stretch goals. Research shows, my own research shows, that too often stretch goals actually demotivate because you're asking people to reach for things they don't think they're capable of. I'm saying you're not pushing them for 200% performance. You're pushing them for 105%, 110%, just a little at a time. When they get there, you get another 110%, another 110%. You're developing them. You're showing them that they're better than they think they are. You're proving to them that they can do more than they knew that they could do before. You're helping them to accomplish things that they didn't think they were capable of. And when they look at you and they tell you with that light in their eyes, oh my goodness, look at what I've done. And if you're a good leader, that's what they're going to say. Look at what I've done, not necessarily look at what you've done. Look at what I've been able to do. That's when you know you've been a success in developing leadership. Forgive me if I keep looking at my watch. There's no clock in here, and I want to make sure I don't run over time, and I see I am just about out of time. So that's what leaders, that's our view of leadership. At least that's my view of leadership, and I know I share it with some people here. That stuff, how to do those two things that I just showed you on the last slide, how to do those, that's going to be one of the big focuses of the next few weeks. As we talk to professors, as we talk to local experts, practitioners, CEOs, executives, we've got a pretty darn cool lineup set for you. We've all got weaknesses and blind spots in our leadership. I do, and you do. We all do. I don't care if you're young or old, black or white, a man or a woman. Anybody can be a great leader. I do believe that, and the research says that. But we've all got blind spots. And if you're watching this and thinking, or listening to this and thinking, you know, I don't have too many blind spots as a leader, I've pretty much got it figured out at this point, that's your blind spot. We've all got one. I do, you do. And the goal is working together over this next 52 weeks. Let's uncover them. Let's see where those blind spots are. And let's walk away from here with just one tool, one thing we can do in the following week that might make a difference. So I challenge you, go back, talk to people, ask them, what does leadership mean to you? Is it a role? Is it a job? Is it power? Or does it mean something deeper? Make sure you're on the same page, and we can go forward together from there. I'm going to turn it back over to Molly to wrap us up.
All right, well done, Jim. And thank you everyone for participating in our first of the 52 weeks of leadership. We'll keep you informed about the themes and speakers coming up next. We have Neil Stroll from Georgetown, who is describing himself as first a leadership coach. He's going to talk about the difference between leadership and leadership development. And following that, we'll have Rich Ferrante, CEO of Rich Products, on putting people first. So we want you to spread the word and join us every week. Looking forward to this forum evolving as we get to know you and you get to know us. Want to just make sure that we answer a couple questions that are in the chat. So if anyone would like to stay on, and Jim, if you're still there, I'd just like to give a few of our participants to ask you some questions. Jim?
Do you want to read questions from the chat?
I'll read it to you because it came to me in the chat. A. Paul asks, leaders can be both very positive and engaging, as well as overpowering and destructive. All we need to do is look at history. If people follow you, are you considered a leader?
What do you think? That's subjective, right? If people follow you, does that make you a leader? Does that make you a supervisor? Does that make you a manager? Does that make you a demagogue? Does that make you a tyrant, right? People have followed brutal dictators over the course of history. So there's no one answer to a question like that, right? My own answer is no, that's not enough to make you a leader. That's enough to make you someone who dominates. That's enough to make you someone with power. That is enough. That means you have power if people are following you. My definition, to lead them, you have to be motivating them to want to follow you, not to have to follow you, but to want to. And you're making them better than they were. And better, there we're getting subjective again. That could be more skilled. That could be more capable of success later in life. That could be more moral or ethical. It could be a lot of different definitions. So my answer, no. Your mileage may vary.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jim. And thank you again, everyone. Look forward to seeing you next week for 52 weeks of leadership. Have a great week and a happy 2021.